So growing up as more of an introverted kind of guy, there were a few things that I hated more than small talk. Being forced into a situation where you have to speak to someone that you don't know. You've got to come up with things to actually talk about and try not to run out of things to say and get into an awkward silence. It fucking sucks so much for me, man. Like, it got to the point where I hated it so much, I just gave up on small talk. I had this reputation in my class where no one wanted to sit next to me because I was just known as that silent kid who wouldn't speak to the person sitting next to them. I would just ignore them. It was that bad for me. And it followed me into my teenage years and university as well. Like, it gets to the point where I'd go to parties with my friends and I wouldn't speak to anyone but them. And when I'd be on my own and there were opportunities that came up to speak to other people, I'd just be chilling in the corner on my phone, trying to look busy, like trying to get out of speaking to other people. And I followed the common advice that you'll see online of, you need to read more books, you need to become a more interesting person, you need to learn about current events to give yourself more things to talk about. And first of all, I just felt like those are really boring things to talk about. Like, no young person realistically is talking about politics at a party. They're just not. And secondly, it just felt extremely forced and inauthentic and bringing up these topics out of nowhere that I don't actually care about or want to talk about just because I don't know what else to say. Surely that is not the best way forward. But ironically, I'd say now small talk is actually an area that I thrive in. It is one of the things I'm best at. And I'd go as far as saying I actually kind of enjoy it. I still find it pretty challenging, but it's kind of like a fun challenge. Like, I look forward to testing out my small talk skills. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but I've come an extremely long way. I'm going to share how I got to this point. So, I'm going to give you my 5-step framework for small talk, which is going to make it so easy for you. I'm going to hold your hand every step of the way. And this framework revolves around an idea I learned in the book Models by Mark Manson. Now, this idea is called following the breadcrumbs. It is using and picking up on these small details, these small little cues that other people are leaving for you in conversations, that if you're listening, if you're paying attention, you can actually use them to guide the conversation forwards and never run out of things to talk about. So you're following this trail of breadcrumbs, this trail of information that the other person is leaving for you. And these things could all potentially lead to new discussions. These are all new potential topics that you could explore in these conversations. And the reason this works so well is because rather than just reaching a point where you run out of things to say and you're forced to just change the topic really abruptly and it feels kind of unnatural and a little bit random, you're actually just letting the conversation naturally evolve. You're using things that they've already given you and just exploring those topics further. Like, it's as natural as you can possibly make it. So yeah, this is the easiest way, in my opinion, to start a conversation, to keep it going, never run out of things to say and get into those awkward silences, which we all hate. And honestly, like, the best case scenario is you start off using this, but then you get into such a fun conversation that you just forget about all of it because you're extremely present and you're just having fun in the moment. And then, I mean, you can always pick it back up if you feel like the conversation is starting to come to a bit of a standstill. You can always come back to this. So, step one, let's assume that you've already gotten the formalities out of the way. You've already said hi to each other. The most important thing you can do right now is just start talking about something, literally anything. Just get a dialogue going between the two of you. And this might sound a little bit vague, but people overthink the start of conversations so much. Like, that's actually the least important part of the whole interaction. I've had conversations where it starts off a little bit awkward and neither of us really know what to say. But then 10, 20 minutes later, we're having the most fun conversation of our lives and we can't even remember how we started talking about this. So don't overthink how to start a conversation, but I can give you some ideas for some general topics to explore. So there's this acronym called FORD, which stands for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. So these are four general areas that you can explore and just start a conversation off of. Maybe start asking some questions. So you could start talking about one of these areas, but I think importantly, you want to be asking open-ended questions. You don't want to just ask questions that can be answered in like a single word response. You want to invite them to open up and share more, to give you more information to work with. So some of my favorite questions are, so if it's family, it could be like, where are you from? What's your family background? What's your ethnicity? Occupation could be, what do you do for a living? What's the most fun part of your job? Recreation, you know, what do you do for fun? Like, what are your hobbies? And then dreams. It's all about, what do you want to achieve? So step two is when we actually start listening for these breadcrumbs, these small little details that we can take forward and use to guide this conversation further. So these could be things like activities, places, emotions, just these small little details that we can record and maybe explore further down the line. So I feel like where a lot of people get caught up in this step is they don't listen to the other person. They're not making notes of these details because they're too wrapped up in what they're going to say next. They're worried they're not going to have anything to say. But just be present and listen, because it will pay off. So let's say with this other person, I went down the route of hobbies and recreation. I asked them, how did you spend your free time this week? Or what did you do over the weekend? And they tell me, oh, I went to this rave on Friday night. It was really cool. and, and then I spent Saturday recovering in bed, but I was really stressed out because I've got this university deadline. I'm like really stressed out about that. So that in itself, if I'm paying attention, that is four breadcrumbs that I could potentially take forward. So we've got the experience of the rave itself. We've got the day after, recovering in bed. We've got like universities and assignments, and then the fact that they were stressed. So we could explore work-life balance. So we've already opened up a bunch of new doors that we could potentially take further. And that is exactly what we want to do for step three. We want to pick the breadcrumb that we are most interested in hearing more about and delve deeper. We want to ask another open-ended question, something which you're genuinely curious to find out about. And it's always better when you pick the breadcrumb that you're most interested in hearing about, because the conversation is more fun for you. You're going to be more engaged, and your responses to the other person are going to be more sincere. Like, you're not faking enthusiasm and excitement. And that's better for them because it makes them feel more important. So let's say we pursued the breadcrumb about the rave and you ask them about it. So you say, wow, bro, that sounds crazy. What kind of rave was it? What kind of music? And they might reply with, oh, it was techno music. It was this rave in an abandoned warehouse. There were 4 different DJs and we stayed till 5 a.m. So that is already 3 or 4 more breadcrumbs that you can take further. So you see how this works. We're literally prompting the information about them, and we've got all these different topics at our disposal that we could take forward. So step 4 is just a reminder that a conversation is a two-way street. We're not trying to turn this into interview mode and overwhelm them with so many questions that it feels like you're not really contributing. So make sure to give your own thoughts, like make it a proper discussion. Have fun, like let things evolve naturally. But I feel like eventually you'll reach a point where you can feel the conversation losing steam. Maybe it's getting a little bit repetitive. Maybe you're a bit uncertain of what to talk about. And this is where it would be ideal to use this technique called a jump off point, which allows you to naturally transition into a completely different subject. So you're not even following the breadcrumbs. You're changing the topic entirely, but still having it feel smooth and natural. So we want to be listening for current aspects of the convo that we could use to jump off into a different subject entirely. So say we're still talking about raves. I could from there jump off into just music as a whole, or different artists or concerts and places I've been to. And you want to bridge the old conversation and the new conversation with what's called a transition statement. So I'll give you an example of one of these. So I could say something like, "Oh, bro, like it sounds like you've been to so many raves. Have you ever been to Budapest? They've got this amazing techno music scene out there." So through that, I've successfully transitioned. I've jumped off from talking about raves and music to travel. So I've opened up a completely different door. So you could essentially rinse and repeat this entire process of asking those open-ended questions, listening out for the breadcrumbs, having fun conversations, and then jumping off into different subjects. You could repeat that forever and yeah, essentially just carry on small talk forever. But I'm not actually sure that you'd want to do that. I feel like one of the most overlooked parts of small talk is just knowing where to end it, is stopping the conversation from getting stale. So I think what a lot of people don't realize is if you carry on a conversation for too long, it doesn't matter if it had been really fun before that. It can kind of leave a bit of a sour impression. You can kind of ruin the fun memory of the conversation you just had. So you kind of want to do the opposite. You actually want to look to exit the conversation when it feels like it's at its most fun. You want to leave them on a high note, leave them wanting more of you. So the ideal time to exit is when, let's say, you fully explored a topic. Instead of jumping off into a new conversation or subject matter, just end it there. Say, just come up with an excuse and go like, "Bro, I've got to run, got to go and find my friends." But thank them for the conversation. Say, "Had a great time talking to you." And now is the ideal time to get their contact details. If you're trying to actually make friends out of this, get their contact details and ask them to connect later. Like, say, "Let's continue the conversation another time." Like, this is a golden opportunity for making new friends and connections. So that was my 5-step framework for small talk. Try it out and see what you think. It saved me from so many awkward moments I can't even count. But yeah, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. I will see you in the next one.